Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. My name's Daniel. I'm 54 years old. If you had told me a decade ago that the same little girl who once begged me to braid her hair before school would one day act like I didn't exist at her wedding, I might have laughed. But that's the strange thing about family sometimes. The people you give the most to are the very ones who believe they're owed even more. And often, they only notice your worth when your credit card stops working. I met Greta when she was 9. Her mother, Oriana, and I were both coming out of difficult divorces, hers more chaotic than mine. Her ex, Joel, wasn't around much. He'd show up twice a year, drop off a check, maybe take Greta for ice cream, then disappear for another 6 months. Meanwhile, Oriana and I were slowly building a stable life together, one day at a time. I never tried to replace anyone, but I was always present at school plays, during scraped knees, through late-night math homework, and her first heartbreak. I made it a point to show up, especially when it wasn't easy. Eventually, Greta started calling me Dad. I never asked her to. I even told her early on I wouldn't try to be that unless she wanted it. So when she looked up at me after her middle school graduation and said, "Thanks, Dad," I got emotional. Oriana squeezed my hand like she knew exactly how much that moment meant to me. I paid for her braces. I helped her buy her first car, not fancy, just a safe used Honda I'd saved up for. When she got into her dream college, I drove the U-Haul myself and spent 2 sleepless nights assembling IKEA furniture in her dorm. Every birthday, every Christmas, even random rainy Tuesdays when she forgot her umbrella, I was there. Not because I had to be, because I loved her. But something shifted when she turned 20. Slowly, subtly, her thank yous became fewer. Her phone calls felt more like chores than conversations. Then during her senior year, Joel made a dramatic return. He'd supposedly changed. He started posting old pictures of the two of them on Facebook with captions like, "So proud of my little girl," always cropping Oriana and me out. Greta ate it up like she'd been starving for his affection. I couldn't blame her. Every child wants to feel wanted by their parent, even if that parent only shows up when it's convenient. Still, I felt like I was being edged out, like I'd just been the stand-in all along. Then came the engagement. She was ecstatic. And at first, so was I. I remember sitting on the couch as she flashed her ring at us, the diamond catching the light. Oriana clapped. I pulled Greta into a hug and said, "We're so proud of you." Greta smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thanks," she said. "I'm just glad I'll have both my parents there to walk me down the aisle." I blinked. Oriana glanced at me, then started to speak. "You mean," but Greta interrupted her. "Of course I mean Dad," she said, referring to Joel, not the man who taught her how to ride a bike or stayed up with her through the flu. Not me. I told myself to let it go. Maybe it was just nostalgia. Maybe she was trying to rebuild something with her past, trying to reconnect, trying to find her roots. I could respect that. I could even step aside for it. But the signs kept stacking up. Greta began calling Joel Dad exclusively again, while I became just Daniel whenever we were around others. She removed my last name from her social media bios, once proudly reading Greta Thompson, and reverted to her birth surname. She never asked me to give a speech. When I gently offered to help with wedding expenses, she nodded with a smile and promptly asked if I could front $12,000 for the venue deposit. There was no talk of repayment, not even a thank you, just the unspoken assumption that I'd handle it. And I did. Not for her, but because I knew Oriana couldn't bear to see her daughter's big day fall apart. I kept telling myself not to take it personally, that I was doing this for the sake of family, for love. But as time passed, I began to feel more like an ATM with legs than any sort of father figure. Oriana noticed too. She tried to bring it up with Greta, gently and carefully, but Greta shut her down. She accused Oriana of trying to guilt-trip me for simply wanting her real dad in her life. That word "real" hurt more than I let on. A week before the wedding, I came home early and overheard a conversation I was never meant to hear. I paused in the hallway as Oriana and Greta talked in the kitchen. "He's paid for almost everything, Greta," Oriana said, her voice calm but firm. "You can't just erase him. He's been more of a father to you than Joel ever was." Greta scoffed. "That was his choice. Nobody made him do it." "You used to call him Dad," Oriana pressed. "That was before I had a real one again," Greta snapped. I walked out the door before they realized I was there. I didn't say a word, just drove aimlessly until the gas light came on. On the wedding day, I put on my best suit. I tied my tie 3 times before I got the knot just right. I arrived early, helped set up chairs, coordinated with the caterers, made sure the sound system worked. Greta barely acknowledged me as I passed by. Joel showed up late, wearing enough cologne to clear the room. Greta squealed and hugged him like a war hero just returned. I stood off to the side, watching everything unfold, feeling like an extra in a movie I'd funded but wasn't invited to star in. During the ceremony, I sat silently beside Oriana. When the officiant asked who would be walking her down the aisle, Greta beamed as she took Joel's arm. No glance in my direction. Not a word. The reception was worse. She shared the father-daughter dance with Joel. During her speech, she thanked her mother, her new in-laws, and my incredible dad Joel, who came back into my life at just the right moment. She never said my name. Not once. I didn't make a scene. I didn't walk out. I smiled when people looked my way. I shook hands, toasted the couple, clapped during the dances. But inside, something was unraveling, a slow, quiet burn. After the cake had been cut and most of the guests had trickled out, I was standing near the back, gathering my jacket, when Greta walked up to me. She looked radiant and smug, the kind of tired that comes from a full day of being celebrated. She handed me a folded piece of paper. The final balance, she said cheerfully, like we were just settling up after lunch. Thought you'd want to take care of it before we fly out tomorrow. I unfolded the paper. The number made my jaw tighten. I looked at her. She smiled, expecting me to nod, to reach for my wallet like always. I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked right past her down the stairs, through the parking lot, and into the night without saying a word. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of anger. That would have been easier. It wasn't even exactly hurt. What I felt was colder, like a door had quietly shut somewhere deep inside me, and I no longer had the energy or desire to ever open it again. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows shift as headlights passed by outside my window. Oriana came home late, visibly frazzled, clearly sensing that something had changed. She tried to talk, but I gently said, "Not tonight." I wasn't ready to say out loud what I already knew. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop, missed calls and messages from Oriana, from Greta, even from Joel, which surprised me since he'd barely acknowledged me all weekend. I ignored them all. Instead, I made coffee, sat down in my home office, and opened the thick binder labeled wedding expenses. Every receipt, every wire transfer, every invoice neatly organized. The total came out to just under $38,000. I had covered over 80% of the entire wedding, including all the last-minute extras Greta insisted on, imported centerpieces, a late-night taco bar, and that absurd champagne tower. And that final balance she'd handed me? It wasn't an official bill, just a handwritten total she'd made up herself, complete with line items I had already paid. She was double billing me, assuming I'd be too soft or too sentimental to say anything. That Sunday, I filed disputes with the venue and every vendor I had paid directly. I sent in receipts, emails, proof of payment. I froze the remaining funds in the joint account I had set up with Oriana, intended only for emergencies in the final days before the wedding. Then I sent Greta a short message. I will no longer be responsible for any further wedding expenses. Any remaining balance is between you and your biological father. Please direct future communication through your mother. Wishing you all the best in your new life. No signature. Just sent it and powered off my phone. That night, Oriana and I had the real conversation. No more tiptoeing. She was heartbroken, not just about Greta, but about us, about everything that had led to this. She admitted she'd noticed Greta's change in attitude, but had hoped it was just stress or wedding nerves. "I thought she'd come around," she said. "I thought once she saw everything you did for her." "She did see," I said quietly. "She just didn't care." Oriana didn't argue. The next few days were a blur. Greta sent a long, self-pitying email, not to apologize, but to defend herself. She said she hadn't meant to hurt my feelings, but it was her day, and she shouldn't have to fake anything for someone else's comfort. She also accused me of being childish for walking out and abandoning my responsibilities, which was ironic, considering I was the only reason her wedding had even happened. I didn't respond. A week later, Joel called. That's right, the man who hadn't contributed a single cent to the wedding, who showed up late, danced, smiled for photos, and left, had the nerve to leave me a voicemail. "Man to man," he said, "I think you overreacted. You know how girls are with their dads, it's emotional. She needed me, and I stepped up. Don't punish her for choosing her real family." I just stared at my phone, stunned as if it had grown teeth. He stepped up? I had stepped up when Greta was rushed to the hospital with appendicitis at 13, and Joel was too busy to show up. I stepped up when her financial aid fell through sophomore year, and she was too ashamed to tell anyone. I stepped up for a decade every single day without asking for anything in return. But Joel bought her a watch, stood beside her in a tux, and suddenly he was Father of the Year? That's when I knew I couldn't just walk away. I had to make it unmistakably clear. I was done being taken for granted. I called my personal accountant and instructed him to begin dissolving the joint account. I updated my will. Greta was no longer listed as a beneficiary. I made a substantial donation to a scholarship fund for foster youth kids who, unlike Greta, genuinely needed the support. Then I wrote one final letter to Oriana. It wasn't angry. It wasn't spiteful. Just final. In it, I explained that while I didn't entirely blame her for what happened, I couldn't continue investing in a family that only saw me as a wallet. I told her I still cared for her and always would, but I needed to protect what little self-respect I had left. I left the letter on the kitchen counter and moved into a condo across town, one I had quietly purchased months earlier as a backup. I never really thought I'd use it, but some part of me must have known. Maybe I'd just been waiting for a reason. Weeks passed, then a month. Oriana reached out a few times. Greta didn't. Through a mutual friend, I heard that she and Joel had tried to take out a personal loan to cover the remaining wedding expenses, but were denied. Apparently, they were shocked that the wealthy stepdad had suddenly disappeared. Then one afternoon, while I was at work, I received a message from Oriana. She's here. She wants to talk. Please, she's crying. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there, staring at the message, remembering every smile I'd given that girl. Every small moment of fatherhood I thought had mattered. Every dollar, every sleepless night, every proud moment at graduation, every whispered, "Don't worry. I've got you." Then I stood up, packed my briefcase, and drove home. When I walked in, Greta was sitting on the couch, hands clasped, eyes red. She stood when she saw me. "Daniel," she began. But I raised a hand, stopping her. What I said next and what she did in response changed everything. She opened her mouth again, but I stayed silent. Calm. In control. I walked past her, set my briefcase on the table like it was just another ordinary day at work, then turned and looked her in the eye. Really looked. Not with anger, but with something firmer. Something final. "You know," I said, "when you were 13, you begged me to come to your school's father-daughter breakfast because you didn't want to sit alone. You told me Joel hadn't even texted in 6 months. I took the morning off, wore that hideous blue tie you loved, and brought your favorite muffins. You held onto my arm and told everyone I was your dad." Greta blinked. Her lips pressed together, and her cheeks flushed. Embarrassment? Shame? I couldn't tell. "You remember that?" she asked quietly. "I remember everything, Greta, because I was there for everything. And I wasn't keeping score. Not then. But apparently someone was." She looked down at her hands, fingers twisting. "I messed up," she said. "I know I did. I was trying to, I don't know, make peace with things. Joel wanted to be more involved. I didn't think it would hurt you like that." I tilted my head. "Didn't think? Or didn't care?" She winced. "That's not fair." "What's not fair?" I cut in, my voice low but steady, "is that you made me pay for a seat at a table I was never really welcome at. You kept walking past me, and every time I told myself to let it go. I sat through every slight, every omission, every quiet erasure of a decade of my life. And still I paid for the napkins." That made her pause. She looked up, confused. "Napkins?" she echoed. "Custom monogrammed napkins," I said, almost laughing at the absurdity. For $172. "Linen. With your new last name. The one I'm not a part of." Silence. "I didn't mean for it to be like this," she murmured. I got caught up in finally having my real dad around. You thought I'd just take it," I said, more quietly now. Like always. That's when Oriana stepped out from the hallway. Her eyes were red, she'd been listening. She didn't speak, but Greta turned to her like she was reaching for a rope. "Mom, tell him." But Oriana only shook her head. Slowly. "No, Greta. Not this time." Greta looked between us, and I think, for the first time, she understood. No one was going to save her with sentiment or guilt. The ground beneath her was shifting, and she didn't know how to stand on it. "I didn't expect you to just disappear," she said, voice cracking. "I didn't disappear," I replied. "I just stopped showing up for people who treat me like a utility. You made a choice at your wedding. I'm making one now." Tears filled her eyes, but nothing stirred in me. No pity, no satisfaction, just quiet. "I came to apologize," she said. "To fix things." "No," I said gently. "You came to stop the fallout." "That's not the same." She sank into the couch, defeated. "So that's it? You're just done?" I looked at her for a long moment. "I don't know," I admitted. "But what I do know is that forgiveness can't be demanded after silence like that. It has to be earned. And that's not something I can hand out like another check." Her shoulders dropped, and for the first time, she didn't argue, didn't protest, didn't try to explain. She just sat there, surrounded by the wreckage of a relationship she hadn't even realized she'd destroyed until it was too late. I gathered my things, gave Oriana a small nod, and headed for the door. Just as my hand touched the knob, Greta called out behind me, her voice trembling. "What do I have to do to fix this?" I paused but didn't turn around. "You start," I said, "by not asking me to tell you." Then I walked out. I didn't go far, just around the block to breathe, to clear my head. I wasn't sure if I was done for good, but I knew I was done being taken for granted. And what happened in the days that followed, that's when things started to get real. The next morning, my phone stayed silent. No texts, no missed calls, no apologies. Just an empty inbox and a strange kind of quiet I hadn't felt in years. And still, despite everything, I checked. Not because I was hoping she'd grovel, but because I needed to know whether she'd really let this die without even a fight. She did. For 3 full days, there was nothing. Oriana sent one text, a simple "I'm so sorry." I didn't reply. I wasn't angry with her, not really, but I needed distance. For years, I'd been the foundation everyone built their lives on. And now that I'd stepped away, the cracks were showing. I was done being the steady background character. I wanted to know if anyone remembered who'd been holding the camera the whole time. On the 4th day, there was a knock at my office door, not the condo, my actual office, where I ran my consulting firm. My assistant buzzed in, sounding unsure. "There's a young woman here. Says her name's Greta. No appointment." I hesitated. My first instinct was to send her away, but something in my assistant's tone, tired, maybe a little uneasy, made me pause. "Send her in," I said. Greta entered, not with the usual confidence she used to wear like a signature scent, but slowly, like someone stepping into a church or a hospital room. Her hair was tied back, makeup minimal. No designer purse, no smug expression. Just her, and a thin folder clutched in her hands. She sat down across from me and opened the folder without a word. Inside, receipts, bank statements, itemized expenses. A typed letter with a clean heading. "Wedding expense reconciliation report." She slid it toward me. "I went through everything," she said quietly. "Every vendor, every transfer, every single charge. I called the venue, the caterer, even the florist. I made a list of everything you paid and what I owe you. I added interest. I broke it into a 3-year repayment plan. If you agree to the terms, I'll sign it." I blinked. She wasn't crying. She wasn't pleading. She was just sitting there, doing the one thing I never thought she would, taking responsibility. "I got your message," she said, "and I hated it. At first, I thought you were being dramatic, even petty. But then, I started looking at it not from my point of view, from yours. I remembered the time you drove 6 hours back from a business trip because I'd forgotten my college essay was due and needed help proofreading. You sat with me until 2 a.m., then left at 5 to make a meeting in another state. You never brought it up again. You just did it." She looked down at her hands, and I thought about my 16th birthday, the party where Joel promised to come but didn't. You spent the evening driving around town looking for the last copy of that out-of-print book series I loved and handed it to me like it was nothing. And I hugged you, really hugged you, because in that moment, I didn't miss him at all. Her voice trembled, but she steadied herself. I remembered all of it. And the more I did, the worse I felt. Because I realized I didn't just cut you out of the wedding, I cut you out of my story. Like you were just a placeholder until the real dad showed up. Then she looked up and met my eyes. "But you weren't a placeholder. You were the only one who stayed." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat had tightened, and I wasn't sure I trusted my voice. "I'm not asking you to forgive me today," she said, "but I need you to know that I see it now. All of it. And I'm going to make it right, not with words, but with time. With action." I opened the folder. The numbers were accurate. The payment plan was fair. She'd even included a clause. If she missed more than 2 payments in a row, the entire debt would be due in full. It was never about the money. She knew that. And that's what made this matter. After a long pause, I nodded. "All right," I said. "Let's see how serious you are." She exhaled, not with relief, but with something deeper. Determination, maybe. That was 6 months ago. Since then, she's made every payment on time. Small ones at first, $150 here, $200 there, but steady. More importantly, she's been present. She calls once a week. She invited me to dinner with her and her husband, just the 3 of us. No speeches, no forced apologies, just a chance to talk, to laugh, to start again. Oriana and I had our own journey too. We didn't get back together right away. We took space. And in that space, we really talked for the first time in years. Now, we're seeing each other again, slowly, carefully, like 2 people learning to trust with their eyes wide open. Last week, Greta asked if I'd consider being part of her child's life. She's pregnant, due in a few months. Her voice was shaking when she asked, like she expected me to say no. I didn't. I told her I'd think about it. Then I smiled. "I've got a lot of great bedtime stories saved up." She cried. This time, they were happy tears. We're not perfect. The scars are still there. But scars mean healing, not forgetting. And for the first time in a long while, I don't feel invisible. I feel seen. Not just for what I gave, but for who I am. Who I've always been. And sometimes, that's the most powerful kind of redemption. Not the quiet exit. Not the bitter farewell. But becoming someone they can no longer overlook. Because in the end, I didn't walk out to punish them. I walked out to remember myself. And now they remember me too. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.